Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Lita, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with only one of my co-hosts, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we thank Big Mike for holding it down the last couple of weeks. It seems as if all of us has been on Community Cop assignment. And as also today, Julian Harper and Father Lucas won't be joining us today as they're on Community Cop assignment. And hopefully we'll see them again next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. But we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to what we hope to be another informative program where truth and real talk occurs. All right, but right away, let's go to some of the topics that we want to discuss. But let's reflect on the unfortunate incidents that happened on 5/31/2009, where African-American police officer was shot and killed at the hands of at a white officer, in the case that they call frequently or mislabeled as friendly fire. Officer Omar Edwards was taking police action while off duty, attempting to apprehend an individual who had broken into his vehicle when plainclothes police officers arrived on the scene and automatically assumed that he was a criminal and fired upon him. Now, those of us in black law enforcement know that there's been numerous occasions when African-American officers in plain clothes have been shot and killed by white police officers. This officer was ultimately vindicated by the Manhattan District Attorney's office and not prosecuted. We pressed for a prosecution because we felt that he acted inappropriately. Michael, why don't you remind some of our viewing audience on this unfortunate incident, Omar Edwards?
Well, I'll just say that certainly the narrative you just gave might have happened. It's a narrative that was developed by the very killers of Omar Edwards. Officer Dutton in particular claimed that that he was taking police action. There's no empirical data to establish that Omar Edwards ever pulled his weapon at all. The facts are that Omar Edwards was shot in his back several times by Officer Dutton. The mayor, as we always mention, the mayor and police commissioner went on TV early the next morning claiming that both Dutton and Omar Edwards had their guns trained on each other, and it was unfortunate that Omar Edwards was killed. But they were both lying. Police Commissioner Kelly was lying, as well as the mayor at that time,
Bloomberg, right?
Michael Bloomberg. Both were lying because he was shot in his back twice and in the forearm. The facts are that that this was strictly based on race, and I say that it was a racial shooting because right after he was shot, he had to lay there like a common criminal for close to 30 minutes before he was taken to Harlem Hospital, where he was unfortunately pronounced dead after a few minutes. He laid there like a common criminal. He was handcuffed, and in being handcuffed, they noticed that he had on a police T-shirt, an academy T-shirt, and then they went in his pocket and saw his ID and shield, and at that point they huddled to discuss a type of strategy that they was going to use, and unfortunately during that time he was losing his life, and ultimately when they eventually did take him, and we have eyewitnesses on the scene, it took close to 30 minutes for them to take him to Harlem Hospital, where he lost his life. So he was killed on the scene, and he was also killed in the follow-up by not getting the proper medical attention in time. And then there was another lie, as I said, by the mayor and police commissioner, who lied to cover up their dastardly deeds. And the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, under Morgenthau at that time, failed to prosecute Officer Dutton and the two other police officers in question, which they should have done. We had that discussion with them, and they know full well what happened, and they know that there was no such thing as a magical bullet where you can be facing your opponent and yet the rounds go into your back. So they were a part of the cover-up, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and that's unfortunate for those things to happen. But it only happens to black cops. It does not happen to white cops. And in 100 Blacks, we always say, white cops don't shoot white cops, black cops don't shoot white cops. and white cops only shoot black cops. So that's the example we say. White cops don't shoot white cops, black cops don't shoot white cops, and white cops don't shoot white cops, but they do shoot black cops. So when you look at that scenario, the only ones that get hurt when all is said and done in civilian attire are black cops.
Right. And primary is because the prejudgment that white police officers always assume a black man with a gun can't be a fellow police officer, can't be a correction officer, can't be any law enforcement officer, or can't be a civilian which legally has the right to have a handgun. So there's always a premature and overly aggressive posture taken by police officers whenever they see an African-American male, sometimes with or without guns. But Omar Edwards, although he's forgotten by the New York City Police Department, he will be never forgotten by 100 blacks in law enforcement who care, as well as countless other African-American officers who were murdered at the hands of fellow white police officers. And the final note is, white police officers always say when they kill African-American police officers that they said police don't move, and that the African-American officer inadvertently turned towards them with the weapon in reaction. But we always found it strange that in all instances, every single incident bar none, where African-American police officers were shot by white police officers but survived, to live to say that he never heard the white police officer say police don't move. Every single incident that the African-American police officer survived the shooting, he always say he never heard the white officer say police don't move. He just heard rounds being fired and felt himself being hit. So we discount these alleged warnings of police don't move.
So you're talking about Sergeant Dexter Brown.
Dexter Brown.
You're talking about Derwin Purnell.
Yes.
And you're talking about Desmond Robinson.
Desmond Robinson.
Okay,
Right.
so that we know at least 3 survivors.
And all of them testified that the officer never said police don't move. So, Omar Edwards will always remember him.
That's right.
And never forget, his killing by a fellow police officer in what we call unfriendly fire. Forging ahead, there's a whole lot of law enforcement stories that we want to talk about as it's becoming more and more clearer to those of you who are slow to catch on that the law enforcement entity in this country is very adversarial as it relates to African Americans, not only going for police officers, but district attorneys and judges. We have a couple of cases we want to talk about. But Michael, let's fast forward to what's happening to Sister Charlene Crooks, who is caught on video being slammed in the ground. I think she was about 8 months pregnant.
That's correct.
And the police officer, and it's so comical, sometimes to hear individuals attempt to justify police actions. The police officer simply asked her for identification.
Right.
She wasn't under arrest. He never, according to the film, pronounced that she was under arrest. He simply requested her identification. She refused to give it to him.
Right.
So for that reason, he chose to arrest her. Now, to my knowledge, and in that particular county, failing to identify yourself to the police officer when you're not under arrest is not a crime.
Right.
So the police officer's actions amount to me to criminality. And for some of you who have a difficult time thinking police officers once in uniform can be criminals, if they're violating the law, then their actions amounts to a crime. So why don't you update the viewing audience on this particular instance where officers slammed the 8-month-old pregnant African-American, visibly pregnant, to the ground simply because she wouldn't give him her identity. She wouldn't identify it.
Well, this happened to Sister Crooks and to those technocrats out there in the state of California. Unlike many other states in America, you do not have to, upon request, give your name to a police officer. That's the law. That's the state law. You do not have to surrender your name. She was just being gracious by giving her name Michelle. She did not even have to do that. But that police officer found that unacceptable. The situation arose out of her and a white woman having a dispute in a school parking lot. They both had parked their cars in the parking lot, and there was discrepancy over who caused whose car to go into the other car. There were no visible marks on the car, so when the police officer arrived, he didn't see a problem because there were no marks to show that there was an accident on the cars. But the white woman insisted that she threw something on the car and that this black woman needed to be checked by the police officers. So after speaking to the white woman, which he did in an inhumane way, when he got to the black woman, now he asked her name. He never asked the white woman her name or to identify herself, her address, things like that. but he immediately, with the black woman, he wanted to know her name. And she said, she even reminded him of the state law. She said, I don't have to give you my name. And he said, yes, you do. She said, well, I'm going to take a minute and make a call to verify that. He said, I'll give you 2 minutes. He gave her probably 10, 12 seconds, and then he went and grabbed her arm and slammed her down. He didn't give her the time, and she reminded him of the law, like I said. He slammed her down on her stomach, and she's 8 months pregnant, and then said that she was resisting arrest, and then they hid the tape. Those two police officers hid the tape, and once the tape was eventually revealed, the district attorney's office dropped the charges immediately. But they concealed the tape for a little while, and while those charges were processed, and then when the tape was revealed and it was discovered, they had to drop the charges. So those two police officers should be arrested and brought up on charges. And when you look at the tape, again, she reminded him of the law. And even though there was a decision going back a while with the Supreme Court relative to a police officer can make mistakes, in this particular case, she reminded him of the law, and he disregarded what she said anyway and slammed her to the ground. He should be arrested for assault and a litany of other charges.
Right. And in a lot of these cases, trust you me, you know, if you look at the police report prior to the video coming out, you know, there's perjury charges that could be charged, because I'm certain that he wrote up his justification for the arrest inaccurately, that he uses creative writing to justify his illegal actions prior to the film coming out, because a lot of times when they do this, they never expect the film action to be public. They think this is an 8-month-old pregnant woman. Nobody's going to know about this situation. So, you know, there's at minimum, you know, like you said, assault charges. Here's an 8-month-old pregnant woman. There's official misconduct charges. You know, abuse. The level of force that police officers use have to be in comparison to the threat that they experience or the force being used against them. You know, here's the part of the video being shown now. You know, excessive force is a crime. So there's a litany of charges that these police officers should be hit with. It's not just enough to throw out charges on someone who should have not been arrested in the first place. And the officer keeps his job, keeps his pension, is not arrested. That's not a deterrent for these police officers not to do what they're clearly doing countless times and being captured on video.
And she told him she's 8 months pregnant. She told him she's pregnant. Why would he slam her stomach down to the ground once he knows that she's pregnant?
That means that he has no disregard. Not only does he have no disregard for her, but he has no disregard for an infant. And mind you, this is not a person that was even alleged to be engaged in any felonious act, any violent act, you know, being a violent criminal. Totally unnecessary.
And again, he would not have slammed down a white woman 8 months pregnant. And you saw how humane he was when he spoke to the white woman before he spoke to the black woman. And he told her that, Miss, I don't see anything wrong with either car. There's not a problem here, but I'll go talk to her. And immediately when he went over there to her, his attitude changed.
And at the you know, the basis of this, that there was no justification for the officer to even put his hands on this sister. According to the state statute, there was no requirement, no demand for her to give the officer her name. She knew that, he knew that, but he ignored that because, as you frequently remind us, you know, the Supreme Court judge stated black men, and that includes black women, have no rights. No rights that a white man is bound to respect.
Decision.
A black man has, this is a Supreme Court judge, a person who went to college, graduated, received all the honors, you know, of an individual who sits on the Supreme Court, stated a black man has no rights, not even one, has no rights that any white man is bound to respect. If there's some level of respect, it's because they feel like being benevolent. But he's not bound, a white man is not bound to respect any right that an African American may have.
And he said that because he didn't want anybody to misconstrue what he was saying. And Chief Justice Taney is still respected in legal circles all over the country. He's talked about highly in Ivy League circles and legal circles all over the country to this day.
And let's talk about another judge, Judge John P. O'Donnell, who excused police officer Michael Brelo in the incident where police officers had fired, I think it was 137 rounds, and killed Melissa Williams and Timothy Russell. You know, of course, I know it was discussed on the program a while how outrageous, you know, 130 shots being fired into the vehicle, not one shot being fired out because there was no vehicle.
Well, there was no rounds.
I mean, there was no gun.
Weapons.
There was no gun. Excuse me. There was a vehicle. There was no weapon.
Right.
And then one police officer, this individual, Michael Brelo, stood on the hood of the vehicle. This is unbelievable.
Well,
and fired and pumped rounds into the vehicle. So ultimately, he was acquitted. The district attorney last week filed a motion against the judge because she stated that his explanation for why he acquitted police officer Brelo was so egregious. Although that acquittal has to stand, she didn't want it to happen again. But the district attorney was faulty. Every police officer who fired any rounds in that particular incident should have been arrested. Not only the officer, even though Michael Brelo, who stood on it, and you can tell that, I mean, that is so unprecedented for a police officer. If you fear the individuals in the vehicle have a weapon, why would you jump on the hood? This is something he probably fantasized for years that he always wanted to do. You know, he probably watched some of these Charles Bronson movies and said, I always want to do that. So first opportunity I get, that's what I'm going to do. But be it as it may, he stands on the hood, and the district attorney refused to prosecute every single officer who fired around, because every single officer has to justify, well, why did you fire? And you can't say you fired around because other officers were firing. You have to justify what was the threat that you observed to yourself or another individual. And since it was found out and discovered that these individuals had no weapon, then all of the officers should be prosecuted. So for a judge to say, even though this officer fired rounds, we don't know if his round was the one that killed him or one of the other police officers that were in charge, so we're going to find him not guilty. That would never happen. If you got 5 African-American males shooting at a police officer and all of them hit him, and the judge said, well, I'm going to excuse the individual because I don't know who fired the round that ultimately killed him, so we're not going to prosecute him for murder because it might have been other guys around. That's such a preposterous decision by a judge.
Well, that only works with black people, because that
black victims
or black victims.
Right.
You can't use that rationale with white people. See, the fact is, 137 rounds, 13 police officers shot their weapon. How does one end up getting charged if 13 fired their weapon? They're counting the amount of rounds that were fired into the vehicle, which amounted to 137. We don't know how many rounds actually were fired. So you're talking about Brelo. Brelo was charged only because he shot 49 times. Now, how did he get to that magical number 49? That's very easily done. It was 16, 16, and 17.
And
now, the reason why it's an odd number is because that initial round, he had one in the chamber. So his initial firing, he emptied 17 shots into the vehicle, and then 16, and then 16, because each magazine and the type of weapon he was carrying holds 16 rounds. So that's why instead of it being 48, it was 49. 17, 16, and 16. Now what he did, it was the performance of his career, as Noel points out, when everyone else stopped shooting. That's the kicker in this. Everyone else stopped shooting. He saw his fellow police officers holstering their weapons. Everything was still. For all intents and purposes, the victims in the car was no longer moving. He runs and jumps up on top of the vehicle because by that time he didn't worry about so-called friendly fire. And now empties his last magazine into the car while on top of the hood. 16 rounds. That last 20 seconds, his fellow police officers watched him on Broadway. The lights were on bright, and he was on top of the vehicle emptying rounds into a car. Now, that's sicker than sick. That's insane. And for him to do that, this is why he was ultimately charged, and the other 12 officers were not charged.
Right. And, you know, for a judge to attempt to excuse this officer's actions because all the officers said that he was in fear of his safety, what are you in fear for? First of all, everyone knows that when you're firing at a target, you're observing the target.
Yes.
And I can tell, I've never been shot, but I know what happens to the human body after it feels rounds entering the body. The reaction is not one of aggression, it's one of defense. How are these individuals, if you're looking at your target, while you're firing your weapons, how are you in fear for your safety from individuals who are being bombarded with bullets, with 9mm rounds, with heavy artillery? How can you articulate, now you might have been in fear of danger, but your fear is unreasonable. And the judge should have known that. But once again, these judges and these prosecutors, like I said, the prosecutor provided an escape by not charging everybody, because the judge is saying, well, listen, he fired, but how do we know that his round, was the one that killed him?
Right. He said that. But see, one thing that's a part of the law is that fear has to be reasonable.
Right.
You cannot just arbitrarily say that you are in fear and that's supposed to fly in a court of law.
Exactly.
No, it's supposed to be reasonable. And that's not reasonable when you're on top of a vehicle. You're no longer seeking cover. You're no longer defensive. Now you are strictly offensive. And since you're offensive, you're trying to take life now, and you're not in fear of your own life. So there's no way he could justify those last 16 rounds over those 20 seconds. He can't justify that, because he was definitely not in fear of his life, because if you're in fear of your life, you should not be on the hood of a car.
And and I'm sure you say the same thing. My thing is, he couldn't even justify firing one round, because there was no deadly physical force presented against himself or any other person. So not only 137 rounds. When you have 137 rounds, you're thinking of military action. You're thinking of war. You're thinking of army. You're not thinking of a civilian population. But none of the officers were justified in firing any rounds. And the district attorney should have prosecuted every single officer, made them give an account for why they fired a round, since there was no threat of deadly physical force or serious physical injury to any of the officers. But she allowed him to have an excuse, and the judge's decision is so preposterous, it's criminal. And this should be a sign to everyone in the African American community. These horrific cases that are happening now every day, maybe more than one time a day, against the African American community. Now the officer can just outright murder you and just say, I fear for my safety.
But they should reintroduce it, and obviously all 13 police officers should go on trial this time. And if by chance, and I'm not giving up on the state, because it's the state's responsibility to do it, the state of Ohio, and if by chance they fail to do that, then the federal government should come in immediately, because that Cleveland police department is off the hook. And I'm not only talking about Tamir Rice, I'm not only talking about that state when it comes to Crawford, who was killed in Walmart. I'm just saying, overall, that state has been so brutal when it comes to black folks that the federal government should rush in there immediately and charge all 13 cops with prosecute them to the full extent of the law for 137 rounds. We ain't talking about Al Capone. We ain't talking about John Gotti. We not talking about some terrorist, ISIS or ISIL, all that. We're talking about a black man and a black woman sitting in a car unarmed. 137 rounds, and that's just what went into the car. That's just definitely uncalled for.
Right. All right. Next case. There's a recent FBI report that announced that white supremacist groups, not only are they prevalent, but many of these individuals have infiltrated law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Now, to some, this is alarming. To some, this is, something that was not known. But I'm reminded of that incident that happened in Waco, Texas, with some of these biker groups, where they even came out and say a lot of their members are law enforcement officers and military individuals. Michael, why don't you tell our viewing audience about this recent report that was revealed by the FBI?
Well, traditionally, this is a 2015 investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, they did this back in 2006. They did it. They said that they saw the trend where white supremacist organizations, not only in the South but in the Midwest as well as the Northeast, all over the country, are going into various law enforcement agencies, police agencies, and becoming officers. Now, that's not exactly new. Obviously, those police officers who killed Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, these sheriffs, They were also Ku Klux Klan, so they were a part of the oldest traditional white supremacist organization in America, as well as the premier terrorist organization in America, the Ku Klux Klan. So it's not that it's unusual, it's just that there has been such a major spike, it's growing in such numbers that even the FBI had to follow up on their 2006 report and do another report and investigation in 2015, and they found out that 256 white supremacist organizations are actively joining police departments all over the country. 256. That's not 100 blacks in law enforcement saying it. That's the FBI saying 256 white supremacist organizations are joining police departments all over the country.
And Michael, it's amusing when you talk about ISIS and talk about terrorist organizations. Once again, I'm always amused when I watch the news and hear, the white news stations, and they talk about ISIS and ISIL, and they talk about how diabolical their actions are in terms of their treatment, their killings, their murders. You know, they had a reporter in a cage and lit him on fire, and they were repudiated, as they should be. But all you have to do is look at, I have a book called Without Sanctuary, and look at the lynchings and the tortures that happen in this country by American citizens.
Right. Thank you, Brother Vernon Wells, for, getting me my book, Without Sanctuary, because I wouldn't have known about it.
Some of the most horrific things happen to African Americans in this country. You're talking about being lit on fire. You're talking about being decapitated, being tortured for hours, and white communities used to bring their friends and their kids and their grandmothers and their aunts and their uncles. Churches used to come out right in this country. So, it's always hypocritical of the white media in this country to talk about the diabolical actions of ISIS. And yet, when they look at so many of these horrific incidents that happen to African Americans, this is ISIS. I'm more concerned, I'm more fearful what's going on in this country than I am what's going on in the so-called Middle East. And so when you talk about these organizations, members of these organizations joining the police force, this should be a cause for great alarm.
Well, look, you know that once you are a member of any police agency, you're now authorized to carry a weapon, and you're in a position now to act out the very things you've always fantasized, as Noel pointed out. So now you're in a position to kill blacks with the license, to be able to exert your will, dominate, exploit, criminalize, do a host of things that you wanted to do, and now you're in a better position to do it as a police officer. So it is a trend that's just been growing so exponentially that now the alarm the FBI is putting out, and I would not be surprised if Klan type people are in the FBI. So if the FBI is pointing that out, then it's really alarming for them to say it.
And they're not only in the police departments, they're in the schools, they're teaching your kids, they're in the hospitals, they're in the banks, they're throughout society.
Corrections, court officers.
Real quick, I just wanted to make a quick mention in regards to a call that's going on now for the Stonewall bar to be a landmark. Now, and a lot of people in the white community and the white press, and I always make a distinction, I just don't say no mainstream press, the white strap, look at romantically at that particular incident. But yet when we look romantically at the riots that happened in Baltimore, people are critical of the riots that happened, or the rebellions that happened in other areas in response to what the people deemed to be police misconduct. Yet, what happened in Stonewall is romanticized. Now, let me just remind you some of the things that happened. It was said that the crowd went berserk. They threw rocks, sticks, bricks at the police officers. There was 10 police officers who had to barricade themselves in the particular restaurant because the crowd had got so violent against the police officers. And at one time, somebody took a lighter fluid and attempted to light the club where the police officers were barricaded on fire. And not one shot was fired by the police officers. My point is that they have a tendency to romanticize and to clean up and to condone whatever they want. Now, this incident is looked at positively.
Right.
And some people commend those individuals who engaged in this riot. But see, because the individuals in that community felt that their rights was being infringed on by members of the New York City Police Department, and they exploded violently. against police officers and attempted to kill 10 of them who had barricaded themselves in that particular club. But this is looked at romantically. But whenever you respond to some of the acts of criminality that are thrown against you, people can even get your leaders to condemn the response or the reaction from your community.
Yeah, and that's interesting that they would want landmark status. And when you think about the bombing of Move, where you had human beings, actually adults and children, in a house, and for the Philadelphia Police Department to actually bomb them and kill the majority of the adults, and then those who survived, obviously they were arrested. That's not that. What happened at the Move site is not made into landmark. It's not romanticized. It is looked at as clean police action, even though they use incendiary devices. And obviously those police officers should have been arrested that did that. And those who gave the orders and everybody from Mayor Good on down should have been arrested for taking that type of action. And they should have been arrested by the feds for dropping bombs, and that's what they actually were. So that is no romanticism there. So when you juxtapose things like that, when you juxtapose horrific rebellions, whether it's what happened in Ferguson, whether it's what happened in Baltimore, to something like what happened in Stonewall, you see the difference and the irresponsibility, as Noel pointed out, of the press.
All right, we're at the segment where we have to open up our phone calls. First caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Calling from Brooklyn.
How you doing, sister?
I'm fine. And yourself?
Okay. Quick one.
Okay, well, I just want to comment on the issue in Ohio. And I'm actually reading this from the assistant prosecutor, Timothy McGinty. And he stated, as things stand in regards to the Grillo verdict, it will endanger the public if allowed, which the judge allowed one of the multiple actors to escape culpability. Now, that's what he wrote.
Right.
The system prosecutor. The other thing is the Department of Justice came out with a report, and this report found a pattern of unreasonable and unnecessary use of force that resulted in the dangerous and reckless behavior by police officers. They go on to say that the abuse cited in the report include excessive use of force by the police involving not just firearms, but also less than lethal weapons like taser, chemical spray, and fists, which were sometimes used for retaliation. The report said the police used excessive force against the mentally ill people and employed tactics that escalate potentially nonviolent encounters into dangerous confrontation. Now, these DOJ reports, Cleveland, Baltimore, Ferguson, New York, but it's funny that the Department of Justice can never get an indictment, but they're going to indict FIFA, 12 people indicted. What's wrong with this picture, brother?
Exactly. Since it's a political theater, they don't do it because they don't want to do it. So they come out with reports, what are right and exact, but they will never follow up on prosecuting white law enforcement agencies because all of them work in cahoots. So it's just wordplay.
Right, and I'll just add to that these reports that are written by DOJ, these are not investigations. And I know somebody might say, Michael, are you crazy? These are not investigations. When you ask a police department to surrender your reports, surrender things that are in the folders, your stats and all that, that's not an investigation because you're only rewriting what they wrote. You're not doing a real investigation, prying into it deeply. So when you just collect data that's already there, that's not, you're just rewriting what was written already. And this is what they've done in Ferguson. This is what they've done in Baltimore. Now, it's alarming what has been revealed, but it was not a real investigation, or they would find so many murders, so many dirty uses of force. They've only found the fines. They've found, you should know whether the person was armed or unarmed. You should know whether it was justified, what the charges were when this person was killed. It's a whole host of things we need to look at.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Calling from Harlem. Good evening, gentlemen.
How you doing, brother?
All right, Hotep.
Hotep.
I want to take this time to, first of all, thank Brother Graves for holding it down while you guys were gone.
Yes, sir.
Second, I want to also thank Brother Graves for standing up to that ignorant caller last week who was trying to read Brother Graves the Riot Act. And when I heard him open his mouth, I said to myself, oh, God, this guy doesn't know what he's asking for. And Brother Graves let him have it.
Thank you, brother.
And I want, if this guy wants to see white dysfunction and what whites do to whites, turn on Dr. Phil, turn on HLN, turn on Nancy Grace, turn on Dr. Drew. Expand your mind, and you see the evil that white folks not only do today, but have been doing since the beginning of time. And I think it's very admirable the way not only Brother Grace stood up for his own integrity, for the show's integrity. And I want to thank Brother Grace for doing that. You did an excellent job in the absence of your colleagues, and your colleagues should be proud of you, Brother Grace.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your call, and we are, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
How you doing, Community Cop family? Brother Ray, how you feel today?
Hotep, brother. Hotep.
I was informed that under the Nixon administration in 1972, that the Senate had initiated a bill, Senate Bill number 1, allowing police throughout the country to use as much excessive force as deadly force as they wanted to. I mean, were you aware of that?
Well, I mean, police officers don't need no congressional bill, you know, they've been exerting excessive force in the African American community even prior before Nixon.
Well, I would say this to you, Ray. I would say that certainly a police officer is only supposed to use the amount of force commensurate with the force, with the resistance in order to effect that arrest. And that's it. That's basically across the board in all 50 states. Now, if you're talking about the government does not have a problem, never have and probably never will, with the heavy-handedness of police departments throughout the entire country. You don't see sitting governors taking action against police officers, what they do to blacks, and you certainly don't see U.S. senators having a problem with it, and you don't even see mayors having a problem with it. So the governments, for the most part, have no problem with heavy-handed police officers.
All right. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello?
Hotep, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem. How are you doing, gentlemen?
All right, brother Hotep. Quick question or comment?
Just a quick comment. I want to tie together something that you were saying towards the end. In 2009, the constitutional professor appointed Janet Napolitano, I believe, as Homeland Security, this welfare organization.
President Obama.
The constitutional professor.
Okay.
And Ms. Napolitano came out with a report that says, you know, yes, quote unquote, we should be vigilant in regards to international terrorists and whatnot. But it seems like there would be a greater threat from coming from within, right here in this country. You have more. There's a more apparent danger from systems like the police department, white supremacists, and, you know, those level of terrorists. And if you look at how the police department is operating today, I think you hit it on the head. And in regards to that clown who called last week, I'm sure he's due to call back. Just, Mr. Graves, just ask him to answer that one question that you asked of him. What did any of these people do that was wrong that warranted their death?
Right.
Good evening, gentlemen.
All right, thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Where you calling from, caller?
Hey, Harlem, how are you?
Okay, Hotep, brother.
Good,
Quick question or comment?
I'll be real quick. I want to say welcome back, Noah Leader.
Hotep.
Noah Leader. And I want to give a big up to Michael Graves. What's up?
Thank you, brother.
I'll be real quick. There's a book out called, you probably already know about it. It's about, it's called Without Sanctuary. And it's a book dealing with all the lynching and stuff like that. And it had Prescott Bush, who had one of our fellow brethren after he castrated him and lynched him, standing right there. And my question to you is, this 256 supposed revelation, do you think that is, I mean, I believe it is, do you think that is a truth? Are they trying to be more truthful, letting us know that all the governors, like you said before, the governors, the mayors, the U.S. senators, federal judges, all these people are all white supremacists anyway, and this is something that's been going on anyway, and maybe the FBI's hand is being forced now? What do you think? And also, I want to say reinstate automatics, and you brothers are doing an awesome job. There's so much more I want to say. I can't think of it right now, but thank you.
There's always next week, brother.
And absolutely, we are under major attack. And I
Yes,
also
sir.
think, I'll be real quick, I think these lynchings have something to do with this next Republican election. 'Cause I do believe, like I said before, he's already picked, and I believe it's going to be a Republican. I think it has something to do with our blood and things like that. And stay up. I'm
okay.
angry, reinstate automatics, but please answer that question about this if you can. Be well. I love you, brothers.
I would
Thank you.
say that I can't say that it has to do with Eric Holder or Loretta Lynch why the FBI did this investigation, because there was a similar one did in 2006 under Bush 43. So the FBI is supposed to monitor terrorist groups, white supremacist groups like that, because they are a danger to America. So that's their job to do that. So if they say it's 256, it could be 456, it could be 756. But they did give a number, and that should be alarming in itself. And they did specify they are infiltrating police departments all over the country. So you're going to see spikes in vicious shootings, unarmed black men, of women being thrown down to the ground that are 8 months pregnant. You're going to see more of that, and you're going to also see, as Noel pointed out, this also you could put with teachers, district attorney officers, with district attorneys, instead of charging 13 men with 137 rounds fired, they're charging one, which they let off. So you're going to see more of this all over, but not just with police departments, with the ones who give it air cover, mayors, district attorneys, and the like.
And, sometimes they come out with this information, sometimes to see what the response is going to be. Because don't forget, they're scientists, and they observe. All right, we came out with this information. What is the response of the African Americans, community colors, black legislators? And if there's no response, they take note of that. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Calling from the Rockaways. What's happening, gentlemen?
Hotel,
All right,
brother.
brother.
Quick question or comment?
Okay, I wish I had got on the phone when that devil got on last week, because I want to let him know that on the plantation, all the plantations, every time they're trying to plant the word niggas in our head and call us niggas, they're either whooping us, killing us, raping our women, or degrading us, and that's what we're doing, what they fed us in our brains today. Also, this government, with the system with that paper, I remember Mississippi burning, the white FBI told his partner, he said, we're not here for the killing of the black man, we're here for the two whiteys. And this is what I saw with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. This government heard the footage of Zimmerman calling his daddy, saying, "There's one Walker, shall I follow him?" And they told him no, and he still followed him, interfered with Trayvon Martin's civil rights, going home, and they still did not convict him.
Right. All right, brother. Good point.
Okay, last but not least, as you were saying, it always made me nervous that a cop can think that I got a gun on me and kill me and have a nice life and don't see no justice
That's
in court
right.
against my killing.
Right. All right, excellent points, brother. Thanks for your phone calls. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
The Bronx.
The Boogie Down.
All right, going to touch on a few things here.
Real quick, brother, we got a lot of phone calls.
All right, Savage Hunter video produced by Fort Lauderdale police officers. 4 were fired from the force protecting nigger and KKK and how they wanted to kill niggers. In Texas, Sergeant Brown, active duty sergeant, goes into for a little weekend stint in jail, 2 days, ends up being killed. There's a video of it. They're watching this guy die. Kevin Allen, 36, shot and killed in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. That's right, up north, people. Bergen County, they still haven't released the guy who killed him, and he killed them in front of our children. And what do you guys think about a task force or training people going into these places like Baltimore, where you have illegal stoppages or slowdown, and having them like commit. There'll be a task force.
Okay.
Have them test that police department to see if they're on duty, and if not, bring them up on charges, and that would help to stem some of these illegal stops and slowdowns,
Right. Okay.
and to
All right, we got your
replenish the people have a training where you train
Okay, brother, we
entry-level
got
police
to cut.
officers.
We
That
got
way,
to cut
when
you,
you're
brother.
firing these guys,
All right,
you
have to
people
cut you,
to
brother. We
plug
got a
in.
lot of phone calls we want to get to, but good point.
Briefly, like Noel said, these are scientists. They put that information out there about there's a serious spike in crime in Baltimore. Maybe they're looking to see what our response is so they can bring back the heavy hand.
Right, and if the officers feel too pressured, they feel like they can't do their job, they should quit. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Hotep, where you calling from?
Hello, Mike. Are you there?
Yes, I'm
Where
here.
you calling from, caller?
It's the caller from last week.
Yes, I'm calling from the better town of downtown Manhattan, not
Okay.
Harlem and not Rockaway.
Quick question or comment? Quick
Mike,
question.
listen to me.
Listen,
I'm
I'm
getting
listening.
tired of listening to the same rap week in and week out. I'm tired of it.
All right, well, you don't have to watch the program. You change the channel,
No,
watch
no,
something
I
else.
like Mike. I can't lose
All right,
the
but
guy.
listen,
but Mike,
listen,
you
sir,
know,
sir,
Do you have a
hold it,
point?
Hold it, sir. Do you have a point?
Yes, they brought up something came out yesterday. 10 precincts shooting are up in the air. Every precinct loaded with blacks. Why don't you comment on that?
Okay, all right. Thank you for,
Loaded
all right,
with blacks.
we'll entertain your call. We'll answer your question, and then we'll move to the next
listening.
caller. Because we're not going back and forth with
When
fools.
blacks are arrested, they get prosecuted to the
Mike,
full
don't
extent
give
of
me
the
that
law.
rap again.
Excuse me, officer. Can you cut the call up? We're not going to entertain foolishness. Go on, respond to
When
us.
blacks are arrested, they are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The problem is when whites are arrested. Whites are not prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And when whites charge a black person, if they don't want them to have a fair trial, they use the Batson challenge to remove and exclude black potential jurors. So this white system of white supremacy, you need to look at it. It's not justice for blacks. And as I said before, you should look at General Amherst, who gave poison blankets and clothes to Native Americans and poison their water system. You should look at what happened on Black Wall Street, where whites rioted and killed poor defenseless men, women, and children in Oklahoma. You should look at Rosewood, Florida. You should look at cases where when blacks came back from the Civil War, all the soldiers' weapons were taken, but the very people who went against America, the rebels, the Confederacy, were giving back their weapons. Look at these travesties of justice, and look at Native Americans being taken from one side of the country all the way to the other side. Look at what your fellow whites have done.
Right. All right, and if you have an intelligent question, do call back. But if you don't, turn the channel, watch something else. Next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, Salaam alaikum, brother.
Walaikum salam. All right, Hotep,
Yes,
brother.
This morning, listen to that cracker, because he's just an evil, wicked devil and a beast.
And the scripture
But my
says,
point
ignore the
is
devil
this,
and he'll
brother.
flee.
My point is this here. The government is allowing all this here to happen to our people.
Yes, sir.
What about that? Your government is allowing this. And the terrorists is these white people here in America killing black people, and now they're killing their own people. But the thing is, any black man who should look himself in the mirror and ask himself, why is these crackers still living that's running around killing our people? And if a nigga votes for Hillary Clinton, he's out of his damn mind. Y'all brothers be blessed and keep moving ahead.
All right, thank you for your phone call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Oh, I'm calling from Manhattan.
Hotep, sister.
How you doing?
All right.
You know I'm one of your biggest fans.
And we-
But I just have to say that I think to even dignify that call from that ignorant racist is just too much. The time you hear his voice, you need to hang up. You're not going to ever persuade him about what's going on here. And to give him that opportunity to say the things he's saying, I think you just need to cut him off immediately. He doesn't deserve an answer, because as much as my brother Gray is telling him and you're telling him all these facts that are so obvious, he's not going to pay you any attention, because he's a racist. He'll always be a racist, and don't dignify his call by answering him. Cut him off immediately.
All right.
Thank you, my brothers. Love you
Thank
much.
you, sister. Thank you for your phone call.
Okay.
Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yo, Manhattan.
Hotep, brother.
Why are they putting KKK on the wall in Fairfield, Connecticut, and how come they're able to bring down an active shooter in Colorado, a white active shooter, no problems, but black people are dropping who don't have weapons in their hands?
Exactly.
Well, also Pennsylvania. We ain't got to go to Colorado. That guy who killed a sheriff or something in Pennsylvania, they brought him back. They didn't kill him.
Oh, yeah, that's
they
right.
hunted
He ran
from
out
the woods.
to the woods.
Right.
Missouri AG office shows that police officers are 75% to stop blacks when they're only, and that's double the number that they're willing to stop whites to stop and frisk blacks, and blacks have shown not to possess anything illegally in the first place.
Right. And in New York statistic, and in Ferguson, Missouri, the Department of Justice showed that whites had a higher percentage of being carrying contraband when they were stopped than African Americans. But it's just white supremacy. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? But thank you for your call, caller. Next caller, we're going to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello.
Yes, sister. How you doing? Where you calling from?
Hello. Good evening. I'm calling from Manhattan.
Okay, Hotep, sister.
Hi, Hotep.
What's that?
How you doing?
All right, we're waiting. Quick question or comment. We'll wind it down.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to just close out with a word about the mother and her 3-year-old son that was killed. The son was shot in the head, 3-year-old boy. And I'd just like to have a word about, because, I think they deserve that, you know, as well as the white man, I'm not giving them no credit now. Don't get me wrong, they don't get no credit, but sometimes you're afraid to leave your door as a black woman, and all. So just please give a word for the people struggling to live in Harlem, in the rough neighborhoods. Give us a good word of, how we're going to do it.
Oh, no doubt. And we live in those neighborhoods.
Thank you.
And sister, excellent point. Thank you for your call.
Get some elected officials with backbone in Harlem, though.
You're welcome.
And sister,
You're
like you
welcome. Have a good day.
Okay, sister. And we make no excuses for the criminal element in our community, those who prey on individuals in our community. We make no excuse for that. We law enforcement officers, we lock them up. No organization have offered more rewards for the arrest and conviction of criminals, people who victimize our sisters and our children, our elderly, and our community. So we make no apologies, no excuses for the criminal element that exists in our community. But we just don't like to be distracted. When people are talking about so-called black on black crime, you never hear a white person call up and say, well, what about the police officers? They're illegally or unlawfully shooting blacks. But when you talk about police officers unlawfully shooting members in our community, people want to divert and say, well, what about black on black crime? We stay on topic. We stay on subject. If we're talking about black on black crime, so-called black on black crime, which is a problem and should be talked about, and we do talk and deal with it, then it's fine. But we don't want no one to attempt to distract us from what we're talking about because they don't want to add up to the reality of the abuse that the system is impounding on our people. Michael, closing comments as we wind down.
For another call.
We don't. Yeah, we
got time.
Yeah, we have more time.
Yeah, we got a minute and a half.
Okay, so we had some more issues. I wanted to mention at one time, I wasn't here, but that would happen in Waco, Texas, with the motorcycle group, and how. If that was African American bikers that came to Waco, Texas, and fired on police officers, and 9 individuals were killed, another 18 was assaulted, man, the words, the adjective that would have been used to describe that event would have been totally different. And I'm watching the commentaries on this. They even had representatives of these outlaw biker groups, meaning they're outside of the law. And, individuals were coming in and attempted to justify, and even white news reporters, if it was black bikers who got together and met in Waco, Texas, and an identical thing happened, the commentary on that would have been totally different.
Absolutely.
The repudiation, the anger, the thuggery, the monsters, all those adjectives would have been utilized. But, I watched people sugarcoat this particular conversation, and it was preposterous. But, people, we have to wake up.
Yeah, I would just say that in closing that I think all of the people that called in relative to how I responded to the caller from Lower Manhattan, certainly I chose to expose him. Anyone that tells me that Trayvon Martin should have died and that Eleanor Bumper should have died, I'm going to allow them to expose themselves. Napoleon said, never interrupt the enemy when they're making a mistake. So when he was exposing himself, I didn't want to interrupt him. I wanted you to see just the thinking of a white supremacist. Instead of us describing it, I wanted you to see it and all of its machinations live and in living color. That's why I allowed him to speak like that. And I would just say in closing, we lost a real Shiro and Ollie McClain, who's made a transition. Her wake is going on right now, which I'm going to try to make, but it's probably, in all likelihood, I won't make it, but I will catch the funeral tomorrow. Ollie McClain, the director and founder of Sankofa International Academy, she's made her transition, a great woman, and at this time I'll stop. Reinstate Automatics.
And Michael exposed that individual last week, and I want that individual to know, don't think you're calling here every week and we're going to entertain your foolishness. No, call CS, NBC, call one of them other stations. You've been exposed. You know, we'll entertain your questions. If you have a serious, intelligent question, we'll answer it. Even if you disagree with us, that's fine. But we're not going to entertain foolishness with you every week. So don't think you're going to get away with that. But on behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our producers, Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, Little Mo, I love. We'd like to thank all of our viewers, all of our callers for watching. We'd like to thank Michael Graves for holding it down, because it's not an easy job sometimes to be here K-Solo. But Michael Graves will put on his uniform, and he's always on point. And we'd like to thank all of you who called in and commended our good brother for holding it down the fort. See you next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Tell a foe, tell a friend. We love you. Knowledge is power. Let's get to work.
My baby, won't you send my baby back?